JW Player and Wowza are extremely excited to bring you today's webinar, 5 Steps to Live Streaming with Wowza and JW Player. Our presenters today are Jeroen Wijering, Founder and Chief Digital Architect at JW Player, and Chris Knowlton, VP and Streaming Industry Evangelist at Wowza Media Systems. Chris is a passionate evangelist for streaming media who has spent over half of the past 25 years developing technologies that make live and on-demand media delivery accessible for companies of all sizes. A recognized industry authority, Chris was honored in 2011 as a Streaming Media All-Star by Streaming Media Magazine, and he holds 3 patents for streaming software technologies. Chris previously spent 10 years driving Microsoft's media server roadmap and developing the core Microsoft Media Platform. He earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Michigan State University. Jeroen is the creator of the highly successful JW Player, which was quickly adopted by website developers around the world due to its ease of use, customizability, and extensibility. Jeroen was also co-founder of Bits on the Run, an online video management system that built on the success of JW Player. Both of these successful businesses combined forces with video advertising startup Longtail Video several years ago, and all now fall under the JW Player brands. After exploring an early interest in physics, Jeroen graduated with honors from the Design Academy in Eindhoven, the Netherlands. Join our presenters now as they walk through setting up a live stream using the powerful, new Wowza streaming engine and the market-leading JW Player 6. Our presenters will demonstrate tips for success, as well as point out common mistakes to avoid so that anyone from novice to expert can get up and running quickly. I will now turn it over to the presenters.
Thank you for the introduction. I wanted to quickly highlight JW Player, the company and the product as well. As many of you may know, we've been around for a while, actually since 2005. The first version of JW Player was Flash only. Then we've built an HTML5 version. And currently we have a broad umbrella of editions of JW Player that work in desktop, browsers, mobile devices. And if you look at our website tomorrow, I'll actually also be announcing our Chromecast version of JW Player. So exciting times to be in the online video space. JW Player is very widely used. We quote here 2 million websites using JW Player, 700 million viewers every month that watch it, 6 billion streams. Also, there are roughly 6 million ads, or 1 billion ad impressions going through JW Player as well. So we're not only making sure that your content is playing and your video can be watched, we also make sure that you can make money out of that. Our biggest differentiator is that we play on every big device, every device browser that has a large market share out there. Think about Internet Explorer, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, the big desktop browsers, also iOS, iPad, iPhone, and Android. And we're really starting to dabble also into the over-the-top space where we're working with Chromecast, Apple TV, Roku, and other devices. Today, we're going to show you how you can unify your setup so your stream will be playing across all these devices. In terms of what else JW Player offers beyond playback everywhere, we have a broad set of controls for branding, making sure that your video player fits perfectly into your website in terms of color, skinning, design, your own logo on top of the video player. Anything you do around captioning, chaptering your content, everything is possible in JW Player. We offer an analytics solution, so you can see how many plays you're running, on which domains are they happening, on which browsers, in which countries. So that analytics service is part of our package. And as I alluded to earlier, there's a monetization option in JW Player where through VAST and VPaid, we're really able to connect any ad server or ad network to your website. So you have the broadest range of options in terms of flexibility for monetizing your video. At the bottom, you see a couple of the companies that we work with. One of them is Wowza, which I'll turn it over to Chris to jump into the details there.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeroen. Well, Wowza Media Systems has a history that is in some ways parallel to JW Player. We have, as a company, been around since 2005, at which time our co-founders recognized that online video was going to be a huge opportunity, and at the same time that it was increasingly complex to do audio and video streaming in a way that most companies could really take advantage of. And so the goal since the start has been to change or simplify and to make better capabilities for streaming media. And since it started, the first product really officially launched in early 2007, and we've been changing the streaming media industry ever since. Our flagship product is Wowza Streaming Engine, formerly known as Wowza Media Server, and it's probably its largest claim to fame, at least what really got it started as it took off, was the fact that it can provide simultaneous delivery of multiple streaming formats, including several traditional streaming protocols and 5 different adaptive bitrate or ABR formats. We've also added on in terms of filling the gaps in the video workflow with what we call add-ons. A couple examples of those are the transcoding add-on, which make it really easy for customers who push that single stream up to a Wowza server, and then transrate it and transcode it as necessary to provide adaptive bitrate streaming to any device on the other end. Also, another add-on that you'll see is really a separate application. It's called Wowza Go Coder. The Wowza Go Coder app is for iOS and Android and allows you to both capture and encode content so that you can easily capture content at an event or at the scene of some news event and push that to a server and then deliver it to JW Player. And then because among the many things that we've been doing, I guess, is all these different innovations year over year, and we've had some great customer support. It's fortunately led to year over year awards for both that innovation and support, and so we've been very happy to have that recognition as a result of all the effort that's gone into this. So Wowza Streaming Engine is now perhaps the most widely used streaming media server software in the world, and it's powering streaming for companies both large and small across all industries and in over 150 countries. And as with JW Player, we have a list of some of the, or some icons here, are logos of some of the customers who use Wowza as part of their streaming solution. And these have overlap, but we clearly don't list the hundreds of thousands of customers here. But we have a very large overlap of customer sets between JW Player and Wowza Media Systems. We've been working together for a long time. I'll let Jeroen actually talk to how the relationship works, since he's been in it for since the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're actually digging into our historical email boxes and found some emails from 2007 where Charlie, the CTO, was actually corresponding with us to get some issues resolved with mutual customers. So there's a long history of supporting mutual customers, which makes a lot of sense given where we both live in this space. We have a very comprehensive product. We have a very feature-rich product, and both of us focus on playing on any device and playing on any kind of like browser TV setup out there. If you look at our cross-feature support, something like security, DRM, encryption, everything that Wowza supports, JW Player tends to support things like the secure token functionality. Load balancing is, of course, important when you're a larger publisher. You have multiple servers. We support all the load balancing functionalities that Wowza offers, so either on the RTMP level, on the HTTP level, or on the DNS level. And the adaptive bitrate protocols that Chris just alluded to, we're definitely supporting them as well in JW Player. So not only can you play out adaptive bitrate from the Wowza engine, JW Player will pick it up and will make sure that best quality is served up to the viewer. Also going forward, there is there's continued strong alignment between Wowza and JW Player. The picture you see in the middle there is actually from the Open Media Software Workshop from last year, where a couple of companies in the media space are talking about, okay, how can we drive more and more towards standards and interoperability? So think about items like WebM, MPEG-Dash, HTTP adaptive streaming. How can we move towards a world in which there is no vendor lock-in, there are open standards, and there is the broadest range of device and platform support for every publisher out there. On the day-to-day side, you'll find a lot of work in terms of examples, tutorials on Wowza's side pertaining to JW Player, and on the JW Player website pertaining to Wowza. Our customer guys, look, if you see the picture, that's our product team people. Our customer support guys are definitely also talking to each other as well on a regular basis.
Yeah, especially when doing live streaming, the problem that most folks are trying to solve is how to reach mini screens, and especially with things like continuing fragmentation on the Android space, withdrawal of Flash player from the Android space, the continuing evolution of the OTT and IPTV space to include gaming consoles and smart TVs and the like. The breadth of screens that folks are trying to reach is increasingly complicated. And one of the things that we're trying to do is simplify that. And that's one of the things that we'll try and talk about as we go forward with the webinar today. So commonly when customers come to us, they are trying to solve live streaming using some traditional technologies that they have. And it may be something like, you know, if they're on the web, they may be using Flash because of its popularity there. If they're in the corporation, they might have to reach a different set of screens because they traditionally have, and it's part of the software package they get as an enterprise with Microsoft. They may be using older technologies that allow them to reach RTSP screens. So that might be older Blackberries or some smart TV products or feature phones in emerging markets. Or they could be using IPTV servers. The challenge with all of these, though, is that you may have to run these kinds of workflows in parallel with different technologies. So you may have different encoders, different server software, different player software, very germane to what we're talking about here today, different operating systems, and then you may have to create your own management layer to handle how all of these work so that you have a single management layer that drives all of these different proprietary workflows. So if you're using these older technologies, you may not even have support for some of the adaptive bitrate streaming. And of course, it's really key today because that really allows your end user to have a great experience as their quality or bandwidth, their resources or bandwidth shift. The quality of the stream will shift up and down, so they get a slightly fuzzier screen maybe for a few seconds during a low bandwidth moment, but they don't get the buffering symbol that so many folks have hated for so many years with low bandwidth and older technologies. So you'll see today, one of the things we'll talk about is the fact that all those formats you see on the right, which include not only traditional streaming like RTSP and RTMP, but also all the adaptive bitrate streaming, HTTP dynamic streaming from Adobe, Apple's HTTP live streaming or HLS, Microsoft smooth streaming, and the latest one, MPEG dynamic adaptive streaming over HTTP, also known as DASH. So I'll let Jeroen kick us off on the 5 steps to live streaming, and we'll walk you through it one by one.
Excellent. So if you could move it to step 1, the capturing. So clearly you get to get the live stream up into the cloud, either from mobile, maybe from an existing service like Shoutcast or Edgecast, or from a desktop streamer. We see a lot of use for our, for example, a product like Wirecast or Adobe Flash Media Live Encoder. As it pertains to Wowza, all the input protocols are supported. So everything from RTSP to TS transport streams to the Flash RTMP streaming or the Shoutcast, Icecast, IC format. Whatever format you have, you can ingest them into the Wowza server, and the Wowza server makes sure that gets ingested into the various formats. In terms of encoding, all kinds of audio formats are supported. Wowza, as Chris said, Wowza can actually transcode content with their transcoder add-on, as long as your format is into HTTP, is in H.264 video and AAC or MP3 audio formats, you're actually pretty good in terms of input, because all the outputs these days tend to be in those formats. Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks. So step 3 is to prepare the audio and video using Wowza Streaming Engine. And you can deploy Wowza Streaming Engine either on premises or in the cloud, and you can do it on computers that are running Linux, Mac, or Windows operating systems. The most common streaming video and audio codecs used today, of course, are H.264 and AAC. We transcode into those. We certainly accept those as streams in, and also support several other formats going out. But for all the adaptive bitrate streaming, everything should just be H.264 and AAC, which makes things simpler. If your content is coming from that older encoder, we can convert that for you, and we can also do the trans rating to having multiple streams. And then we have the delivery step. Once that content has been converted appropriately, you can actually deliver it directly from Wowza servers. You can have it on Wowza Streaming Engine servers that are on premises. You could have them in the cloud. As Jeroen mentioned earlier, you could have multiple servers and do load balancing across those. Or you could just be publishing into content delivery networks, such as Akamai, Amazon CloudFront, or Mirror Image as examples. This technology works with any CDN in the world, and in fact, half the CDNs in the world are using Wowza Streaming Engine as some part of their video workflow. But today, we want to focus on reaching as many screens as possible with as few formats as possible. And so we'll focus on just 2 that tie in very nicely with Wowza Streaming Engine and JW Player, and those are Apple's HTTP live streaming, or HLS, and RTMP streaming. Jeroen, back to you.
Yeah. In terms of formats, JW Player has is very much vested into the Apple HTTP live streaming format, because that is one that is supported by Apple's iPhone and iPad devices, and therefore by extension, like a large part of the mobile market. What we've done with JW Player is actually support that HTTP live streaming protocol onto desktop as well. So that's a fairly unique offering where you can use that single format across all your browsers and devices. In addition to iOS, iPad, iPhone, the various Android devices do also support Apple's HTTP live streaming protocol, with the one caveat that it is only for version 4.0 and above. So if you are running like your regular, a very broad audience will probably have like 4 out of 5 of the Android people will have a version of 4.0 and above. 1 out of 5 will have a smaller version. What we do tell to people who want to target those older Android phones is to actually also use the RTSP output support from Wowza and feed that into those Android devices. The other protocol, RTMP, is it's a slightly older protocol. It's not one of the like today very standard HTTP streaming protocols, but it has certain advantages over the HTTP protocols like Apple's HLS. One of the advantages that we see every now and then is the ability to really stream with very low latency. So when you have applications in which, for example, we see people that are able to control a camera or have a live webcam on a robot that they can control online, or there are more chat-related, like chat-style sessions. That is where HTTP is very useful to make that latency as low as possible and provide that instant feedback to the user. The thing you're doing is immediately showing on the screen. And the last step is, of course, consumption. So when all the player is embedded, all the streams are up and running, we'll make sure that your content is not only playable on computers, but also on mobile, tablets, game consoles, smart TV devices and set-top boxes like Chromecast, Roku, and maybe Amazon's new device that just got announced today. We'll still have to test that one out. Chris, back to you for the demo.
All right. Well, let's flip over to the demo, show you a quick demo of how this all works. So let me first just introduce you really quickly to Wowza streaming engine. If you're a first-time user, you get this nice introduction, and what it does is provide just a quick overview of what does the video workflow look like, and how does it work with what we call applications within Wowza. Think of applications, if you're familiar with Microsoft technologies, you may think of this as a publishing point, but it's essentially a set of configuration settings that allow you to dictate how you're going to get the content, where it's coming from, and then how you're going to deliver it, and what formats you're going to use. And then I'll go ahead and sign in. And then when the main screen comes up, this is the new web-based admin console for Wowza Streaming Engine. So those of you who haven't used Wowza Media Server or Wowza Streaming Engine in a while will find this to be something new. Or if you haven't used it at all, then welcome to our console. I'm going to skip right ahead. This is just the overview page. It tells you at a glance what kind of resources you have on your machine, what kind of license you're running, whether you have add-ons enabled, things like that, and gives you contextual help down the right-hand side. For purposes of brevity, I'm going to jump right ahead to a live application that's already set up, just to show you how we would actually get a stream into Wowza Streaming Engine. And so you'll see here on the page, this is the live demo application page, and I'm going to go, let me show you real quick. First, what it does is it shows you some information here about what is actually enabled, what formats are enabled, what playback types. In this case, we've enabled all of them by default, dash, HLS, RTMP. This covers the broad set of formats. We also have some others which you can set through configuration files, but these are the most common ones, so these are the ones that we've surfaced in the UI. And I'm going to go ahead to, on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to incoming publishers. And this is where you see all of the settings for IP address and every other piece of information that you need to put into an encoder to push a live stream to Wowza Streaming Engine. And so that's the information shown at the top. Down below is a section where we have an auto configuration section, where if you happen to be using Wowza Go Coder, the app I referred to earlier that allows you to both capture and encode, you can actually send information right to your iPhone or your iOS device, iPad, or coming soon, your Android device, and send information right to it. If you happen to be running this, in fact, this is a responsive design. If you happen to be running on a tablet, then you may have something like this, where you can actually resize the screen very easily and see what it would look like if you were on a tablet or on an iPhone. You see that the UI just wraps around very nicely. It doesn't make you pan or scroll back and forth in order to see everything. But what I'll do is go down further. There's actually an email field here where if you don't happen to be running on your iPad, you're not administering your server from the iPad or from an iOS device or any other browser for that matter, you can go ahead and enter an email address that where you can pick up your email on that mobile device, and you can email yourself the configuration where you have the Go Coder application installed. And so an email will pop up, and I'll hit high importance and hit send, and that'll send out. And then I'll flip over to my iPhone, which is what I'm using for the demo today. So I'll pull over my screen, and it's pop out of here for a second. So what you see in the middle of the screen now is the screen from my iPhone. I'm just doing a screen share using AirPlay. And I'll go into email. And what I'll see is that email that I just sent to myself in the middle of the screen. And I will tap on that. And there's a link inside that takes me right to Go Coder configuration. It'll launch the app and configure everything for me automatically. So I'll tap on that. And the first thing that I'll see is a screen that asks if I want to overwrite my settings, because I've already entered settings on here before, and it's aware that this will override everything based on the server configuration that I just sent. Let me flip the screen horizontal, flip my phone horizontal, And I'll go ahead and tap yes. What you'll see next is behind it is a black screen that shows contextual help information. Easily tells you what buttons to push in order to change different things. And I will go ahead and tap on, you see my desktop for a second here. I'll tap on server settings. And you'll see that it already has settings in there for server and port. Application is already set. And publisher login, I'll go ahead and do real quick. By default, we do not send credentials for the login through the email, just for security reasons. And I'll just pull this off here real quick and type in the password. And that's done. So I'll just show you a couple other things here. We have some video settings. I want to go in and change those. Rather than you hearing audio from both my headset and from the iPhone, I'll go ahead and choose video only. And then I'll choose to change the size to 720p because that works really well on an iPhone. And there's some other filters and things here. There's an auto restart that is set by default to on, so that should the stream or the connection drop in it for any reason, it will automatically try to reconnect with Wowza Streaming Engine. And there are some other filters and things here. We're not going to use those today. And the last thing is the bit rate. By default, right now it's set to 2500 kilobits per second based on detected bandwidth. I'm going to go ahead and use that. And I'm going to go ahead and then hit the start button. And what we'll see is a time clock clicking down in the upper left saying that we have a live stream. And rather than look at me, I'll set it over here and give you the view of the virtual aquarium, which is probably more interesting than looking at me. And I'll go back to Wowza Streaming Engine. And we'll go to the Incoming Streams tab. And what you'll see there is that there's an actual stream already coming in from that device. And a couple of things to note about it. I'll zoom in a little bit here. You can, in fact, see the IP address. And there's a red button over here under Actions, which allows you to actually start recording immediately. So not only are you getting the live stream, you can record it for archive purposes and for on-demand playback later. But what's interesting here, just to get you started, is we have a set of test players that come built in. These are just enough to let you know, hey, this thing is working, and working in all the different formats. And so that gives you some instant peace of mind that, hey, what I've set up here is working, it's broadcasting to the world, I can see it. And the first thing you'll see is that we have the Adobe RTMP tab comes up. I'll go ahead and click Start. And if all goes well, in a moment, you'll see the virtual aquarium on my screen, on the player. And then I can also switch to the other tabs. We have MPEG Dash, we have Apple HLS, Adobe HDS, Microsoft Smooth Streaming, and mobile. Now for the purposes of this, I'm going to go to the mobile tab, and I'll show you why in just a second. Let me go now to the JW Player site and log in. All right, so now I'm on the site, and what I want to do here is I want to publish a video. So I already have an account with JW Player. It's a premium account, and that allows me to do HLS streaming, insert ads, things like that. I'm going to click on the button, the red button right there near the middle of the screen that says Publish a Video Now. And I'm going to let Jeroen actually walk through the steps necessary here in order for me to publish a video using JW Player, so you can see how easy it is to not only get that stream to Wowza Streaming Engine, which happens to be running in this case on a Google Compute Engine instance, but could be on any cloud or on-premises instance anywhere. And have him walk us through now how to configure JW Player so that you can actually play that back on any device in the world using that universal HLS format with RTMP failover.
Yep, excellent. So inside the JW Player account, we have this publish wizard. It's really 3 steps to get your video live. First one is grab your video file. The second one is make the changes to the video player so it nicely fits and formats for your website. And then the third one is grab that embed code, the few lines of HTML that you put into your site to get that video player live and that stream working across all browsers and devices. In terms of the first step, what we do need is we need the URL to the Apple HLS stream. So we'll go back to Wowza and actually copy paste that stream from the Wowza Go Coder, from the Wowza application into the JW player. Now the two other items are actually optional. So a poster image is always a good idea to put up before a video player is before the video starts, so people are drawn to the image and they want to see that what the video is about. The video title is good to give some context. So with those three filled out, we're going to move to the second step of the video publishing. So in here, on the left side, you see the design options of your video player. On the right side, you see a preview of your video player. And then at the bottom, there is the more advanced playback options. As you can see, Chris created a beautiful slide with both Wowza and JW player logos, and the title of the stream is actually playing there. It's actually showing. So if you hit that video, you will actually see the live stream in progress. In terms of, I think that most of the items in terms of sizing, skinning the player speak for themselves. I would like to highlight our Google Analytics integration a little bit. That is a very interesting option that if you're a customer of both JW Player, Wowza, and Google Analytics, you might want to check, because at that point we're actually sending from JW Player starts and completes of video content into your Google Analytics account. So that way your video analytics are showing next to your regular page views, and you get a good sense of the size of your audience when you're doing these live streams, these live events. Then moving forward, we can go to the bottom right of the page and then hit the big embed code button. So this is actually the last step. This is actually the last step of the setup. There's two pieces of code that you should embed into your website. As the text says, the script tag, that's JW Player itself, the core library that's like doing all the magic. That you place that somewhere in the head of your website. Then the part at the bottom, that is the actual embed code that tells JW Player which stream to play, what title it has, and you can really see the items that we have set up here. Stream, image, title, the width and the aspect ratio. That's a cool feature that allows you to set up the player in a responsive site. So whatever size the video site is, the player will actually automatically scale to the width of that, maintaining the aspect ratio of 16:9. So let's say if you have a 4:3 webinar or a 4:3 live stream, you want to change that aspect ratio to 4:3, and whatever the size of your website is, the video player will automatically adjust itself.
All right, great. I think that pretty much wraps up the demo. Let me go back to the slides and turn it over to Jeroen for a recap of what we've just seen.
Perfect. So what we've just seen is, so we've used Wowza Go Coder to actually source the video, in this case, the beautiful aquarium. Online, you'll see the soccer match, the Dutch soccer match. We send it, the encoder, from the encoder into the server. The email short link that Wowza provides is a very nifty feature to get your encoder up and running really fast. From the server, the stream is sent in Apple's HLS format into JW Player. And then JW Player in turn ensures that your stream is playing back on any device that that supports either Flash or HTML5 video content.
All right, great. Well, let's quickly go over some best practices. There are a few to keep in mind. The first one is, as you've seen, although we went through this rather quickly, and actually we were going rather slowly for us because we were stopping to explain some things, but it is very easy in just a matter of moments once you understand, are familiar with Wowza Streaming Engine and Go Coder and JW Player, publishing with JW Player, how easy you can get started and get a player going, embedded in a website, and delivered to so many different devices. But give yourself time, because there's a learning curve as you go over that. Jeroen, do you want to walk us through the rest of the best practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of yeah, good second one, in addition to give yourself time, like especially the first couple of times, keep the encoding workflow easy. It's always easy to jump into like specific bells and whistles and try to like support this weird edge device and that weird format. Let's just start with a very plain pipeline, and then like if that's a successful if that project is running successful, that event was successful, then build it out. So don't try to overdo yourself in the first setup. Life is a very difficult beast. There is always something that's going wrong just at the moment of the event, and you don't want to end up in a situation where you basically made it too complicated to move forward. The next best practice is use live AVR streaming. Video quality is very important. Wowza servers, especially with its transcoder add-on, is perfectly equipped to support adaptive bitrate streaming. So the highest quality content is showing on every device. That's great both on the higher end, where you want to support full glorious 1080p content to larger desktops or set-top boxes. That also goes very true. That's also very true on the lower end, where somebody may be watching on a mobile device, is on a 3G network, and is just trying. Look, it's just doesn't have enough bandwidth to show like a larger size file. So that smaller size file makes sure that the experience is still uninterrupted. Scalability is a fourth item. So this webinar, the instance of Wowza in this webinar was run off Google's cloud. Cloud services are very useful to scale out your content. Another great cloud provider is Amazon Web Services. Wowza has standard instances for Amazon. On top of that, you can actually put Amazon's CloudFront product in front of your Wowza server to take care of all the load and make sure that you can broadly broadcast across the world. And then the last item is don't be afraid to ask. So if you have any questions, just bring them up. Definitely after the slides of this webinar, there's plenty of time to get some Q&A going.
All right, well, some of the pitfalls, I guess the best practices that Jeroen just mentioned really help set expectations and will avoid a lot of problems that folks commonly face when they get started. But let me expand on a few areas that are frequent topics for support tickets that come in when folks do get started, especially if you're streaming to live streams and to large audiences. If you have some planned events starting at a scheduled time, don't just have an empty player, a blank player window sitting there. If nothing else, have a countdown clock or something like this as a solution. Or potentially after the event, same thing. You don't want to just have a blank window. Have something in the window, whether it be on-demand playback, replay capability, or DVR, so that somebody can very easily see something. If they come to the link early, they come to the link late, they still get a good experience and can interact with the player that you have there. The next thing is to start thinking about how much capacity your server hardware has. We found that folks are sometimes a little bit optimistic about how many streams they can get from a server, which is not a reflection at all on the software, just the physical limitations of the hardware that they're using. And every server happens to be different. We have some transcoding benchmarks on our site, but that doesn't necessarily tell you how many streams you can get out of the given box that you happen to be running on. And it's more specific to transcoder scenarios as well. But with highly tuned commodity hardware, we do have customers getting out as much as 8 gigabits per second of streams out of a server. The best thing that you can do is test that. Make sure that your server is as powerful as you think it is for delivering the content, and that you have the network connectivity. I'm actually kind of jumping into the next one there. You know, you can do load testing. There are third-party load testing tools. We have a free load testing tool so that you can do some testing before your event. And of course, another good way is to just do this as part of a holistic test, also do network testing and player testing. And you can do that by setting up some kind of mock event ahead of your real event. You know, invite several hundred of your closest friends to all watch at the same time. Maybe some interesting piece of content just to get folks to tune in for a short while and sort of run water through the pipes, as the saying goes. Make sure that everything works the way you think it's going to work, because as Jeroen mentioned, inevitably when you're first testing things out, something will go a little bit differently than you expect, and you want to figure that out ahead of your actual live event. The fourth thing is, once you've got it all going, you may have some content that just takes off. Maybe you have some kind of viral spike. And if that happens, you really want to make sure that you are ready to handle that, whether it be by having additional servers already spun up. Again, this is where cloud, like running on Amazon EC2, is really helpful. You could have several servers already spun up and load balance across those, or you can just push into CloudFront. Or any other CDN for that matter, and scale out dramatically so that you never have to worry about whether or not your content just took off with a viral spike. And the last thing is really to make sure, as you're putting together your video workflow, that you're choosing technologies which are not outdated. The fact that you're here is a very good sign. You're dealing with two companies here that have very much leading edge technologies. But sometimes folks are using older technologies which aren't being innovated on as quickly as they might be, and that can be a challenge, because you may find that a new set of devices comes out that's very popular next year, and you can't reach them because your technology is not innovating fast enough to be able to support that with an update. So I guess the message there is, don't get stuck using obsolete technologies if possible. So thanks for watching so far. We have a couple of, for those of you who are attending today, we have a couple of offers for you as next steps, basically as bonuses for being here. The first is from Wowza, and that's 10% off Wowza's streaming engine for 1 year. So we have a subscription model. It's a monthly subscription, and basically we're saying for the first 12 months, we'll give you 10% off the monthly price. And also we're including in that our network DVR add-on, which allows you to give your end users the capability to do instant replay, late joiner capabilities. Somebody joins 15 minutes into a program, they can rewind all the way to the beginning and start from there and then catch up. And other trick play capabilities like that. That's free for 6 months. And there's a code here, and that expires at the end of the year. And I'll let Jeroen talk about the JW Player offer.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise, for those here interested in JW Player, we have a special offer for our premium edition, and that is 20% off for the JW Player Premium for your first year. So JW Player is a yearly subscription, so for your first year, you'll get it for 20% less. JW Player Premium is the edition that offers the HLS streaming capabilities to the desktop that was just shown to you. And in addition to that, JW Player Premium offers the Google Analytics integration, multiple skins. So you can select one of our 8 in-house designed skins in addition to the default JW Player skin. And there are functionalities for both social sharing and related videos into JW Player. Last, JW Player, the premium edition, can be used on up to 10 different websites. So if you're a video producer or a web designer running with multiple projects, the regular JW Player can be used on one project, one website. JW Player Premium can be used on up to 10 projects.
Perfect. And we'll have an email going out after this to all the attendees to give you all the details that you need to know, including links where to go. So now I'll turn it back to Ryan to walk us through the Q&A session.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Jeroen, as well. And thanks for all of you for attending today's session. I want to remind you that we're recording today's session, and we'll be sending a link to the recording and the presentation slides in a follow-up email after the event. So at this time, I have both Chris and Jeroen live on the line, and I'll try to alternate questions between them, and feel free to jump in if you guys have some feedback. But I think there's a lot of questions regarding formats, what the preferred format is for AVR streaming, with the dominance of iOS devices. one of the things I want to bring up is a common support question for the Wowza support, and I think for JW Player as well, is the support of HLS and Apple HLS. And with that, I know that a premium edition of JW Player is needed to support that kind of streaming. Jeroen, can you provide a little bit more feedback on HLS?
Absolutely. So the HLS protocol from Apple is supported in JW Player in the premium edition across Apple's iOS devices, Android 4.0 devices and above, and the desktop JW Player on Chrome, Internet Explorer, Safari, Opera, and Firefox. So for the free and the pro versions of JW Player, the HLS functionality still works on iOS and Android, but the desktop HLS functionality, where we basically, as JW Player, take over all the transmuxing and the rendering of the video, that one is only available in a premium and above.
Thanks, Jeroen. And Chris, can you provide a little bit more from the Wowza streaming engine side?
Yeah, in terms of HLS, it certainly is one of the most popular formats. And to Jeroen's earlier point, because JW Player provides HLS across both devices and desktop, makes for really a nice universal format. One of the things that'll be interesting to see, and I'm probably jumping ahead to another question that you have coming up, Ryan, is today HLS works really well. There's this new standard called Dash, and it'll be interesting to see where that plays because it is trying to position itself as the universal format of the future. So I think as long as Apple continues, though, to support HLS, even though they helped define Dash, I think HLS will be a key factor, and given the investments that companies like ours and others in the ecosystem and consumer electronics manufacturers have made in HLS, it'll continue to be probably the sort of go-to format for many folks doing streaming.
Yeah, and I know, Chris, you're stealing my thunder a little bit, and we have several questions coming in regarding MPEG Dash. So let's go and focus on that. I have a question here from Roman. What are the main advantages of MPEG Dash over HLS? Are you going to support MPEG Dash on desktop playback? So from a streaming perspective, I'll let you answer that side of it, Chris. And then from a player perspective, we'll have Jeroen give us his 2 cents on MPEG Dash support.
Sure. Well, the nice thing about Dash is that it was defined by a whole bunch of companies, including Adobe, Microsoft, and Apple. And so you got folks in there who had a vested interest in providing a great streaming experience and who had some products that were already very powerful in their own ways, and they combined the best of those into one standard format. And the key here is that it's standard. It's not driven by any one vendor like some of the other adaptive streaming formats. And therefore, the whole ecosystem is invested in it. You don't have to worry that if this one vendor stops supporting this, suddenly everything that I've invested in it goes away. So our expectation is that much more of the industry and the ecosystem will adopt Dash and invest in Dash because it is a standard that everyone basically has a vested interest in moving forward. It is, as I said, it has some of the best features of HDS, HLS, and Smooth, so it's very good from that perspective. The biggest challenge at the moment is just that there has been limited adoption and there aren't that many playback devices. And at that, I'll actually transition that to Jeroen because I expect he can speak to that a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, first, with JW Player, we are definitely very interested in Dash. We're testing the protocol. We're looking into at what point does it make sense for us to really make generally available the MPEG Dash protocol. As Chris was saying, HLS today is the leading format. It's the only format that works on not only iOS devices but also on platforms like Roku. And we're a little bit waiting until broader API level support for MPEG Dash is appearing in devices and platforms before we will be making that switch. But on the player side, there's always, as Chris said, there's the fact that it is a standard that makes it much more interesting. Right now with HLS, you have things like Google and Android, both on the Android side and on the Chrome side, being semi-vested into HLS because it's Apple's format. So why would Google start supporting that? So you get this like suboptimal HLS experiences on Android. With MPEG-, Google is actually very much on board. In terms of device support, you see HTML5 actually is really focusing on MPEG-. There are two standards right now being deployed across HTML5 browsers. One of them is called the streaming media extensions. The other one is called the encrypted media extensions. The first one allows for adaptive streaming in HTML5. The other one allows for DRM in the HTML5. And both of them are really modeled after, like from like a streaming perspective, to be compatible with MPEG-. While theoretically you could hook up any kind of streaming format into these standards, MPEG- is really what works well. And then the last part I would say around like MPEG- being as like useful as a standard is that there are many additional functionalities beyond just your basic adaptive streaming that are usually hard to do with a vendor proprietary format. With a format like MPEG-, you really see all those use cases start to get crystallized and start to get interoperable. Think about items like showing metadata of video or audio content, for example, song and artist information and live audio streaming. Closed captioning is something that with MPEG- is very much standardized and rationalized. So you'll be able to see a lot more live closed captioning appearing across the web. And something like server-side ad insertion, where on the server side, the video ads are actually inserted into the stream. So there is no like buffering experience and like weird glitches going on around starts and stops of ads. That is something that with HLS has always been very clunky and hacky. And with MPEG- standards are emerging. So every ad server, every streaming server, and every player can actually talk to each other and deliver the best experience to the user.
Thanks, Jeroen. Where the future is going. We have reached the top of the hour, but I think we're going to have a great Q&A session. So I'm going to keep it open for maybe another 10 minutes if Chris and Jeroen, you guys are cool with hanging out. And if you guys do have to leave for any reason, we will be including the full Q&A session in the recording as well. We'll be sending that in the next couple of days. So we had a question here from Vilius, and it's exactly to the point that we were just discussing. He says, a question to both of you guys as you're experts in the field. Where do you think streaming industry is going in terms of streaming protocol support? Do you see a consensus between major vendors or support one protocol in the near future? Or is it still a completely split industry and everybody's still pushing their own? I think that question's really been answered, in talking about, HLS and then with MPEG-. So what I really want to focus on now, and I think where the industry is going, what Jeroen was saying, is getting away from proprietary codecs, proprietary formats to a more platform agnostic or format agnostic or protocol agnostic model. And I think that question's already been answered in that respect. One thing that I want to focus on is a little bit is HTML5, because I think JW Player leads the way when it comes to HTML5. There are a lot of JW Player competitors who still haven't made that switch and haven't been able to create that technology. So this is a question for you, Jeroen, regarding HTML5 support. Is, do the Android 4X devices support HLS via the video tag or via some other web embeddable means when it comes to HTML5?
So Android devices 4 and above are actually supporting HLS through the video tag. There are a couple of quirks in how they play back. We have, if you go to jwplayer.com/HTML5, you'll actually see an HTML5 report that we're every quarter compiling that shows exactly what those quirks are. There are small hindrances to the user experience. They're not complete showstoppers. It's a little bit of the tail of Android. It's never perfect. But at this point, HLS is the best solution for delivering your contents to Android devices.
Thanks, Jeroen. And I don't think you have much to add there, Chris, since HTML5 is more of a player issue than it is a server issue. But I do have quite a few questions. A lot of people are asking on the server side, talking about latency. And we have a question from Sumant here. If you had a choice, what technology has the lowest latency stream?
Oh, that's a good one. And Jeroen really touched on it earlier. If you're going to use, if you really need low latency, RTMP is a good way to get that. RTSP is also not so bad, especially if you're going for feature phones and devices which might not support HLS or RTMP streaming. But most folks use RTMP, and in fact, Wowza Streaming Engine has a low latency mode with RTMP that allows some of our customers to do real-time communication with that.
And as a follow-up to that, I have a question here from Jeff. And granted, this is a very loaded question, Chris, so I do warn you. But what is the typical latency of the Wowza streaming workflow?
Oh, that really depends. It's one of those great "it depends" kinds of answers. It depends on which protocol you're using, what you've tuned that protocol to do as far as latency and buffering time all along the chain, both in the encoder and just really every step along the way. So as I mentioned, some of our customers are actually using Wowza Streaming Engine in workflows where they're getting real-time communication, which means typically less than 100 milliseconds latency, end-to-end latency. But the typical user is seeing several seconds at least. And in the case of HLS, there's typically higher latency if you use the default settings, just because of the way the protocol is designed. It takes it waits until it gets three 10-second chunks of video before it starts playing back typically. And Jeroen, you can correct me if it's different with JW Player, but on iOS devices, that's typically what happens. And so you typically, and it usually takes a couple of seconds to load up the first few 10-second chunks. So it's typically the longest. But you can also tune HLS down to lower latencies as well. So again, it really depends on how many hops you're taking, where you've tuned everything along the way. It could go anywhere from 100 milliseconds to, say, 20 or 30 seconds, depending on how many hops you have and how you've tuned everything.
Yeah, Jeroen, do you have anything to add on the latency side?
Yeah, and yeah, there's two things I wanted to add on the latency side. First, for RTMP specifically, JW Player has an option to set the buffer length of the video. So basically the amount of time the player keeps in the buffer until it starts playing. For very low latency setups, you might actually want to set that option to a very low value. So a value like 0.1 seconds or 0.01 seconds is possible. If you look at the JW Player support documentation, read through the RTMP guide, you'll find that buffer length option. Set it to a low feedback. And then on the HLS side, JW Player very much mimics what Apple is doing on their end. So we are also loading 3 chunks of video content before we actually start playing. With the default setup of 10 seconds, that would mean that only that on the player side, you are already 30 seconds behind your live ad. The video can be tuned in Wowza to make those segments smaller. You do want to be very careful and not go below 4 seconds as a very minimum. That's when kind of like the chunk length is falling outside of the adaptive bitrate. It's falling outside of the ranges of the adaptive bitrate heuristics, and the adaptive bitrate heuristics actually start to trip up and do a bad job. Overall, like adaptive bitrate is meant for broadcast streaming, and a protocol like RTMP is really good for that, like low latency, more like one-on-one webcasting, teleconferencing.
And as Jeroen referenced, you'll find articles on both of our sites about how to set these low latency settings. So feel free to look there, and if you try and you have questions, you'll find more answers on our forums or by contacting support, and we'll bring those up on the screen on the next slide, the support contacts.
So Craig's question is, how does Wowza and JW Player handle closed caption for the hearing impaired? So I will say, let's have Chris, you take a stab at this first, and I think Jeroen can finish it up talking about the extensibility of closed captioning support from the player side.
On the Wowza streaming engine side, we can accept captions either embedded in the stream from an encoder, or as sidecar files, so different text files that are coming in separately for on-demand content. And we can take those multiple formats in and then recombine them as necessary to match with multiple formats going out. And so, again, using the capabilities that are already there in the server, you can take in existing captions and mux those across different streams so that each stream format that you're delivering to gets those captions as well. Jeroen, do you want to talk about the player side a little bit?
Yeah, so on the player side, for live streaming in particular, we are capable of playing back the 608 captioning. So the CEA 608 captioning support that is built into the Apple HLS protocol that will work on both iOS devices and on desktop browsers with JW Player Premium. So that is the preferred way to deliver captioning, closed captioning for live events. And in addition to that, for RTMP streaming, JW Player also supports captioning served up by Wowza through text data events. So the player will pick up those in RTMP, show the CC button, allow the user to enable them, and then render the captions. For on-demand content, we generally prefer the loading of sidecar files. JW Player supports sidecars in the WebVTT format that's currently being rationalized by the W3C as like the format to caption all your content in HTML5. And then in addition to that, JW Player also supports the FXP formats for captioning of on-demand content.
Thanks, Jeroen. And we've gone 10 minutes over, but let's go for another 5 minutes. I think we still have questions coming in thick and fast. And as I mentioned previously, a lot of the questions we're not going to be able to get to during the session today. So we'll be sure to follow up with all of those, both from the JW Player side as well as here at Wowza. So one of the questions that came in is talking about, is there any limit on the number of incoming streams in a single application? And Wowza from our end, we don't limit it, but you are limited by your bandwidth, of course, and your CPU from the hardware that you're using, whether it be in the cloud or a local deployment. So you're limited by your network, the bandwidth, and hardware capacity. Anything to add there, Chris, on that question?
No, I guess the only thing that I can think of as far as incoming streams, because I think you said incoming, the only limitation there is if you're doing transcoding. Our transcoder add-on is licensed per incoming stream. So if you're doing 5 channels of incoming streams and then converting all those to multiple adaptive bitrate formats going out, you would need 5 transcoder add-on license instances.
Okay, I'm glad you pointed that out. It's a very good point.
But in terms of concurrent streams or limits on how many streams I can do with a server, there are no imposed limits as far as outbound goes at all.
Okay. Well, we did have in preparation for the webinar, we had a couple of stock questions that we thought we were going to get to in case we didn't have any questions come through, but boy, were we wrong. But there are a couple of questions I do want to bring up because I think it goes to the point of the relationship that we have between Wowza and JW Player. So a couple of questions here, and I'll throw it over to Jeroen, and then Jeroen, you can pass it over to Chris. And the two questions are, does the JW Player platform and Wowza compete in any way? And then does the JW Player platform use Wowza for delivery? So if you want to answer that question, Jeroen, and then Chris, you can provide some follow-up.
So the JW platform is very much is our hosting offering. So you will be, if you use JW platform in addition to JW Player, you will be able to upload, and then we will transcode your videos into a format that can be played across the internet, and we'll also deliver those files for you. And while there are similarities between JW platform and Wowza streaming engine, I would say there's not that much overlap. JW platform is very much focused on managing your content, so providing you with tools to set up metadata, to grab video analytics, to set up video players easily with that content that you're ingesting. And the Wowza streaming server is really focused on multi-format, multi-resolution, and also very importantly live. So JW Platform supports the ingestion of on-demand clips where we take the transcoding. Wowza is both on-demand and live. And typically your original files will be, for on-demand, will already be sitting somewhere. And you have encoded them with another service. Wowza just ensures that everything is served up in as many formats for as many devices as possible. In terms of whether JW Platform is using Wowza, we are actually using various CDNs that that are like delivering our content. To my knowledge, we're not using Wowza yet, but we could be starting to do that actually very soon. So that's an interesting one to follow up offline.
Well, I will point out that we are using the JW player on our website, so I think we got you beat there, Jeroen.
That's good to hear. That is good to hear. We will strike back.
So I will just address this because I think this is a good sign off. First of all, I do want to point out, if you want to bring up the final thoughts slide, Chris, we do have a couple of specials that are running right now, both on the Wowza website as well as the JW Player website. So I encourage you to visit those URLs and type in the coupon codes that we included in the Q&A earlier. But the final question I wanted to do is, if people are looking to deploy both Wowza and JW Player together, where do they go for mutual support? So I'll ask you first, Chris.
Well, I've listed resources on the slide here that I think will be very helpful. If you have any support questions, the first place to go really is wowza.com/support, and there it will give you all the options, including it'll point you to the correct forums. It'll show you, give you links to both our quick overview document and our full documentation. And just going through the quick steps document answers so many questions. That will be great, very helpful for you. And then there's also a link there to our support team. And then if you have sales questions, especially around the deal or the offer made today with the 10% off, then please follow up with sales@wowza.com, and they will reply to you with more information, details, links to get started.
Most of the questions should be very clear whether you want to direct them to Wowza or JW Player. Direct your questions around ingestion of the streams to the Wowza team. Direct your questions around skinning or analytics to the JW Player team. There's just definitely a certain set of questions, especially in the HLS playout sites, that could go either way. But whether you'll jump into the Wowza documentation or contact the Wowza team, or you'll jump into the JW Player documentation and contact our support engineers. Both of them are very much aware of this overlap and will be able to quickly point you into the right direction.
Well, I think our stock answer here at Wowza support is it's always a player issue, so I think we're fine there. But no, just kidding.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether that's our stock answer too. But
all kidding aside, I think for a lot of these issues, there are some very complex systems in place with a lot of our customers, and I think sometimes it is hard to diagnose issues. So I think whether the common point of contact is JW Player support or Wowza, I think that diagnosis, we have a good relationship between JW Player and ourselves, and I think both our companies pride ourselves in our customer service. So I encourage you to visit those resources. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. And I really want to thank Jeroen and JW Player for hosting this event and hosting us. And my thanks as well to Chris Knowlton on the Wowza side for presenting and answering questions today. So thank you both so much.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone who attended.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And we'll keep the webinar open for a few more minutes to give you guys an opportunity to copy out the information and submit any final questions. I'll be sure to aggregate all those questions and forward them on to the right people so we can follow up with you in the next couple of days. But thanks all so much for attending, and look for that follow-up email with the recording of today's event as well as the slides. We'll be sure to get that out to you in the next couple of days. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.